and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday to you too, and welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with London market, technology, change, innovation. This week, we're going to kind of major on claims ahead of the London Market Claims Conference coming up in a couple of weeks' time, actually a week on Tuesday. So we've got the results of the pre-event survey that we can share the highlights of, and we'll be publishing the full reports next week. But to kick things off, Ben, I pressed the wrong button. that's yeah. Should have looked at the mapping of those pads. But anyway, yeah, 2 seconds away, Bill. That's what I wanted. I thought we'd start with a bit of news, because cyber seems to be in the, well, we talked about it in the past, but it seems to be in the news more and more. And I think it was yesterday, Thursday, the Jaguar Land Rover story was the main story of the Today program, mainly to do with the supply chain and the amount of companies and jobs that depended on that extended supply chain. And then an even more shocking story today about the data that's been stolen from the nursery chain, which just seems like crazy. You know, it's like from one extreme, a huge organization, to kind of a very small chain of nurseries, and also the Heathrow stuff. You know, airports have been disrupted. They seem like a bit of a soft target in whatever IT systems they're using for either check-in or whatever it is. So it's becoming more and more prevalent. So I think it's quite interesting how the industry responds as these threats become more and more prevalent and covered in the national news. And the reason I say that is because there'll be companies our size and a little bit bigger that will now be bumping up the agenda in meetings, the threat of cyber attacks, and I'm sure we'll be contacting their brokers or whoever to see what type of coverage there is, how much it is, and weighing up whether to buy it. And we've talked in the past for smaller organizations, probably like this nursery chain, but also I don't think Jaguar had cover either. Whether the benefits and the costs actually make it a viable proposition or not. I'm quite interested to see how things are going to evolve, especially as we're going to talk about claims in a minute, and what that claim response is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's one thing, which is how these cyber attacks are going to roll out, and can governments do anything about it, or businesses do anything about it? They said that JLR was negotiating but hadn't agreed its cyber cover, which I suppose is surprising that a big company like that wouldn't have that sort of cover. But then again, they could argue they were profitable enough to cover that anyway. And how much does cyber insurance cover? Anyway, I suppose a counter argument is that there are some figures being published now on what the losses are to these businesses. So I think Co-op came out with a 200 million loss of revenue.
Yeah.
But profit, for a supermarket on 200 million revenue is probably less than 5%, I imagine. So not very big in profit terms. So I think there'll be some estimation of what are these cyber attacks causing in terms of pure financial damage, which I guess insurers will have to work out too, versus the level of disruption. And I think the JLR one is interesting because obviously it's the supply chain, it's the smaller businesses who are losing out because of effectively business interruption. So you might say that the cover that they would want is business interruption because of a shutdown of a plant, for example. And then, the travel one is, flights cancelled because basically the third party that provides the ticketing doesn't work, is also shut down. So the pattern, I think, seems to be that the cyber attack happens, the company has to shut down and work out where all its data is and it's taking a long time to get that all back up and running. And that's where the problem comes, not necessarily that the ransom cost or something similar was the damage, So it's evolving, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, you're right. I went to Co-op. I don't often go there, but they've got a petrol station on the side of one that's local to us. And I noticed that when I paid for the petrol and the groceries that I bought in the shop, they had to do 2 separate transactions still. They couldn't do it on the same till. So they had the till for the petrol, and then they have tills for grocery. So
so that's the result of the hack.
Yeah. So I assume so. It wasn't like that before.
No. You think,
You just used one till and they split it up.
They're really attacking fairly basic processes and systems things, aren't they? So, and those are, it's like if you attack payroll, it's a nightmare because just by example, my wife's company last year had a problem with payroll where their system had gone wrong. It wasn't a hack, but it took them 7 or 8 months to sort it out, and I think that's the problem, is the data is so disrupted when you've had one of these hacks.
I think you're absolutely right. And also it's, just the nursery thing. It seems very distressing in that situation. And, you take something like a payroll hack. Again, you've got kind of sensitive information and data in there that in fact affects your employees. And then you're kind of dealing with questions, and that whole disruption element that you're talking about is critical. So really interesting, I think.
And I think all these things, as I say, they kind of evolve. You get one type of attack, and then you get another type. They're always constantly moving and changing. I suppose it's a bit of cat and mouse, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the sense of keeping ahead of the game and who's doing it, and some of it is almost just kids being vexatious because they can do it, and then, but what I believe isn't happening yet quite, which is would be the really worrying thing, is if government started to do this, and apparently at the moment it's more crime related than governmental hacks,
Yeah. Oh, that's a cheery note to end that section on.
Yeah. Well, it's everything is because we've got a technologizing world. We've got these things are. It's the ramifications, isn't it? And cyber's one of them. The other one that was discussed yesterday was drones. Obviously, with warfare now largely seeming to be fought using drones, they're saying that in Ukraine there are lots of areas where you can't live because they have effectively been shut down by these drones, which are really, really cheap to produce. They're relatively to normal equipment. So they said that if the MOD bought a drone, 7-8 years ago, they would be 4 or 5 years in development, and you get a big expensive drone like millions and millions, and so on. Now they're costing hundreds of pounds really to produce and make, and they're pretty deadly. So you can, but equally you have to. The technology keeps moving on all the time, so the technology to bring them down is also moving on. So they get a whole anti-drone defense system that shoots them all down, and then someone develops a new drone that avoids the anti-defense system. So again, you've got this cat and mouse over the dark and the good side of technology, really.
Always comes back to Star Wars.
It does, really. Yeah, it does. It's the Death Star, or it's Darth Vader or Han Solo.
Yeah. It pays your money, it takes your choice.
Are you a Luke Skywalker type of guy or a
I
Darth
was
Vader?
always a Han Solo.
Yeah.
He was the guy, the cool one, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Luke was a bit of a petulant child.
Yeah, he was. It was kind of annoying. Han Solo got the girls.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, there you go. Star Wars comment. Let's move things on, Ben, and just talk about London Market Claims. So, for those that don't know, we run a conference called London Market Claims, where we look at both the strategic challenges and changes that are taking place within the claims environment in the London market, but also how individual companies are looking at their claims operating model and how they can improve that, both in terms of claims performance, so efficiency, but also improving claim service for customers and clients. So ahead of the event, we run a claims survey, and we're going to be discussing this in a podcast next week. But I thought we could just touch on some of the headlines, Ben, that the survey results kind of reveal, and just have a chat about them. So, from the survey, I've identified sort of 5 key themes that have come out. So the first one being AI and talent. So there is a kind of real excitement around AI in claims, but also this kind of nagging worry and I guess the uncertainty of how these technologies will play out as well. So there's a kind of a tension in there. So there's an appetite to adopt them, but also kind of, the governance stuff that we've talked about before. So this kind of tension between kind of leaning too much on machines as opposed to kind of bringing in or bringing through the next generation of talent. How are those skills and capabilities going to change, and how are we going to create environments where the next generation of claims leaders are going to learn about claims service and be able to have those conversations with clients. And I think it's a really interesting, or it will be a very interesting conversation to have at the event to gauge which organizations, on a spectrum of going for it hell for leather and not doing anything at all, where people are. I think having had the briefing calls now with a number of speakers, and I think I was talking to you earlier this week, Ben, where I was talking about a couple of breakfast briefings where I've run, where the larger brokers are represented in the room, and they are absolutely behind the digitization and automation of a lot of the processes in both underwriting and claims. And I think it'll be interesting when we have the conference to gauge, where the carriers are in light of that discussion. So yeah, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that one, on Ben.
I mean, I think while AI is the word now that seems to be replacing technology and data, as a kind of catch-all, I think it's largely going to be about efficiency, one, which could be AI and not AI. I mean, it's really around that, not just in claims, but can you get then the data at your fingertips, if you like, if you work in a claims team? So that's always been the hope, is that your workflow systems do that. So I think that's going to happen. And then you've got the risk transfer element of the market, where that is pricing and so on, and that could be automated as well. And I think there's a general feeling that those things are going to happen, whether that's AI or just technology in general. I think there's a push on that now, and I think it's I think the money's going in because you can't afford not to do it. You can't afford to risk that you get left behind, which is your point. I think that's important. I don't think the talent thing has yet been worked out at all. I mean, I think that's got to be really thought through, probably more so than the technology, which is what do people do in terms of adding value in jobs in future? Now, that's, partly to do with innovation and growth, really. And I think there's interesting things on that. And I think what's going to happen is all organizations are going to have to look carefully at what they do in the future and what they offer, not just kind of cross over with other parts of the industry, and I think, and that's, and then the counterintuitive thing is that, you've also got to offer more, less sort of things like claims from claims is the function, right? It's not the benefit or the service. It's just the thing, and that creates a problem, as I've said before. But you've also got to offer a holistic kind of service product for the clients, and I'd be interesting to talk next week on the podcast about that. That's what, clients don't really care where it comes from, as long as they get the thing they want, which is to get risk off the balance sheet and be able to get on with growing their businesses with some protection.
Cool. Let me bring up the next couple, because you've kind of touched on a couple of those which kind of resonate with respondents of the survey. So the kind of that operational efficiency and kind of transformation. So just to kind of dig a bit deeper into that, I get the sense that there is a kind of, everybody sees kind of that efficiency gain that you were just talking about through automation, and that kind of inevitability around taking away some of that drudge, the admin side of things. But there's kind of still a resistance to change within organizations to do that, and a lot of that comes down to kind of either kind of legacy tech kind of stuff that's in there that's a real blocker, or a legacy mindset that needs to be tackled around there. And I think it's difficult for people to build momentum around embedding technology into traditional processes and systems when you do see stuff like the Blueprint 2 or the target operating model or these centralized initiatives kind of falling over. It doesn't exactly fill you with confidence that perhaps your internal one's going to work. But,
I think the other thing is that culturally people will find some of this quite threatening, and be quite pleased that BP2 and things have been pushed out and not happening, and there's a bit of chaos. But because you could say, when you say to people, we're going to become more efficient through technology, then do people really know the sort of job that they're doing? And do they, because people aren't fools, usually they know what's going on. So if they say, well, do I add any value in my job? I don't. If I do what is largely a process type job, then I will be replaced. Now, for some people, they say that's fantastic because I can go and do something more interesting and get paid for that. Maybe get paid more for that. But I think still for a lot of people, they might say, let's say I'm in my early 50s and I don't quite want to finish yet, but equally, I don't necessarily want to kind of step up into some brave new world of innovation. So I'll hang on, and I won't really, I'll kind of be a bit of a sticking point. I'll not deliberately, but I'll just kind of not majorly run with this. And I think that is a drag on businesses, because you haven't got the ready-made talent there to suddenly bring them all in, and transformation doesn't happen like that. So there's all that stuff is going to be tough, really. And so I don't think, if you look at AI as that word, that does not change things on its own. It has to be worked into an organization and the people.
Yeah, definitely. So that'll be an interesting conversation. I think also then kind of underpinning what we've just been talking about in those first couple of bullet points, kind of the data and analytics side of things. So I think this is a challenge in every organization. It's also a priority. Standardization keeps coming up, whether we need a consistent approach or whether new tools will be able to kind of solve the data inconsistency challenges that we've been grappling with for many years. It's a big issue, and also it falls outside of just the claims remit. You can look at any kind of function within the London market. You could look at finance, underwriting, claims, whatever it is, and kind of the data flows and the standards that are being used or aren't being used is a really thorny, tricky issue to kind of tackle.
Yes, and I don't think people yet have I think we have an understanding of data, if you like, in an operational or a technological sense, but there are different types of data, the stuff you can have kind of codified on computers, and then the stuff that's in people's heads. And I think there's lots of things that computerization doesn't touch, which is sales, how people sell things in the market, for example, and how they create relationships, and how they explain things and educate. All those things are very, very important, the glue, if you like, of the market. And then there's the nuts and bolts of, is my claim in week 3 and will it be paid out in week 10? All that sort of stuff. You're dealing with a lot of things. I spoke at a loss adjusters conference last week, and they were talking about the same things, and they're in an interesting position, loss adjusters, because they have to kind of be so-called empathetic or understand the client's needs, manage the claimant's needs, and the financial ombudsman was speaking after me, and they were saying, there's often difficulty simply because of the way people are, how they operate as humans in a situation where there's a claim, for example. And they described a case study where the woman had been just basically very difficult and a pain in the arse, I think, for everybody working on the reparations that were made as a result of this. And I think the builders walked out and everybody walked out, and this woman was kind of left on her own. Then she put a claim into a complaint in. But the ombudsman turns it down and said, well, it's kind of you that's the problem here, not all these other people trying to do their job. And I only mention that because that's kind of real life. That's what it is like. And you therefore have to deal with people. They're unpredictable, but we also are trying to fix the processes at the same time. But let's not be under any illusion that just by fixing all these processes and having some data at our fingertips, we'll suddenly have growth and, it will be, all milk and honey, which you just won't, because you'll have the same things, but we'll all be on a level playing field with a lot more data.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of building on that kind of that growth thing. So if you look at where the growth has taken place, it's been in DA. And what has that now got? You've got a whole load of kind of DA claims and then bordereau challenges, which links into the data conversation that we've just had. I think that is starting to cause real headaches within. I've heard how the amount of resource that is going into kind of those bordereau reports, trying to get them in some kind of fit state so that they can be used for the purposes that they're supposed to be used for, is incredible, and a massive, as you were saying, kind of a drag on the industry that can't continue. And then the final one is kind of client expectations and inflation as well. And that, to your points around the difficult customers and being able to empathize with them and move a claim forward, efficiency means that you've got to deal with people and have those communication skills and all that kind of thing. So, I mean,
I would turn that table around and put client expectations at the front, as a top bullet, and then and I'd drop inflation down to a separate and say, look, what we've got to do as an industry now is work out what customers want and then explain to them what we can do and what we can't do. I think the trouble is that at the moment we are doing it in that way, which is the wrong way around, where we're saying, let's get a bit of technology, that'll make us efficient, then we'll have good data, and then we'll sort out this horrible problem of anything we've outsourced without thinking about anything other than cost. That pretty much describes what that bullet point list is. Oh, and then hopefully at the end, we'll have something the clients want. Whereas really you want to design this so that it's actually strip out all the stuff you don't need, look at processes and say, can we fix these without even technology? Can we just get people to sort them so that people get what they want? And can we get customers to understand better what they're going to get? And then they play ball with us a bit more. There's a great statistic I saw the other day from JD Power, a survey company in the US that does some insurance research like us. And they said that there's if a customer is told, there's no difference, between a customer who's told and explained about a price rise than someone who doesn't have a price rise. So in other words, once you explain a premium increase, people are just as satisfied with a person who didn't have any premium increase. So it just shows the power of communication and understanding what the customer wants. And there's a huge amount of efficiency in that if you get it right. Amazon understands what its customers want, has a fantastic process, but it starts with Jeff Bezos used to put a chair in the room, every room, which he said, before we start this meeting, that's the customer represented in the room. So that's what great businesses do. Insurance does not do that at the moment, and it gets itself into a lot of trouble. So I think that's something that'd be really interesting to talk about at Claims next week or the week after.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. Thanks for that, Ben. We wanted to also touch on, kind of just building on what we just talked about there, the other item in the news, which is the Which kind of super complaint, which is related to claims, maybe not specifically the London market, but do you want to give us a story, Ben?
Yes. So this is Which has had a number of, a fairly long running, maybe 18 months, 2 years campaign against insurance as being sort of single day insurance as being rip off, and it started with motor, interestingly. So I think they dropped the motor one because they didn't find, I think when they looked at it, they found that motor actually wasn't too bad because, as they say here, something like 90% of motor claims are actually are paid, 95% or something. So there's not such a problem with motor, but they did find building insurance and travel was a problem. So in a way, I think that they didn't find that the whole industry was at fault, but they found that certain parts of the industry were. But it's still an attack on the whole industry from Which. And they've launched, the thing about super complaints is that certain organizations who are the champion, as Which are, of the consumer or they're allowed to launch these super complaints because they represent a number of interests. I was thinking, I wonder if Grace Church could do that, because we kind of do that, but I'm sure we can't. Anyway, they've launched this, and so it's focused around a number of areas, really. One is claims, saying that claims don't get paid out. So it's really talking about where claims kind of go wrong and don't seem to be, there's almost a kind of endemic issue, and I'll come back to that. The other is where claims are outsourced, which has been a worry for the regulator as well, saying that because you're either going to a loss adjuster or you're going to a TPA or you're going to someone else that they don't, then the communication breaks down, and that's fair. And then they go also right back to the beginning to say when the policy is sold, the sales element, they're not explaining what the policy is and what it does and so on and so forth. So these are old, long-standing complaints about the industry, and I would completely endorse that those are areas of weakness, big weakness. I think what it also says, though, what it also implies, I think, is a lot of these examples that they pull out, and they pull out, lots and lots of examples of people being let down. Particularly, there was a really interesting story about a woman and her husband who had seen some subsidence in their house. They'd had some cracks, and then the initial review by the insurer was that it was caused by a big oak tree, which was like 300 years old and was quite famous. And they said, just rip that down and it'll be all fine. So they asked for a second opinion. They then are asked to rip up 20 trees in their garden because they said it's all caused by trees. They get someone else in who says it's nothing to do with the trees. It's because you're sitting on red clay, which is drying out, and that's causing contraction, stress to the building, and So taking trees away will make it worse. And then the insurer issues I don't know how they do this, but a kind of writ to say you've got to sell the oak tree, you've got to cut it down and sell it because there's a problem with the building. And anyway, it's become a quite public campaign, and it's been 5 years to sort this thing, and they've still not got an answer on it. It seems to so regardless, it seems to me that probably what's going to happen is the insurer eventually will say, actually, yes, we've reviewed this, and it is down to clay bedding. We need to underpin your house. But the cheaper option was to take the trees out, right? But I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think it's just the lines of communication have broken down somewhere through this. At the loss adjusters conference, we had a very, very similar case study from the financial ombudsman, actually, about subsidence, which they upheld and what they upheld it on was that not that the insurer was wrong to look at it and examine what was going on, but they should have made a decision much earlier on based on the balance of probability, not on some absolute decision. So which has kind of got a point here. I don't, but it is also more widely or launching a kind of broadside against the whole industry, and I think that's pretty damaging because it basically kind of implies that there's no point buying this insurance at all because it's not going to pay out. And I'm not entirely supportive of what Which is doing, but that's their prerogative. I am critical of the industry because we do not get onto the front foot around this sort of stuff, and it's because we do poorly communicate, really, around products and things, and then we make mistakes around the claims, often which are to do with and I've spoken to insurers where they've said we've had some dreadful claims that have completely gone wrong, and it wasn't anything to do with other than someone took it in their head to say we're not paying, and they should have just paid it. So we kind of need to sort this out because otherwise it's damaging. Now there is going to be a review, so the FCA may say this is unfounded, or they may do something about it. But the other complaint is the FCA is now not doing anything about this sort of stuff because it's backed off, because the government's told it to back off.
Yeah, interesting. It is interesting. So I listened to on Radio 4, I accidentally bumped into it when I was driving home, that You and Yours program, and they were leading on this kind of insurance industry which super complaint. And so they had callers calling in, and the subsidence one was on there, but it was preceded by somebody who was just going, I think insurance was great. I bought the accidental cover, I knocked over a TV, the insurer went, brilliant. You can also claim for this and this and this. And they went, oh, right, okay. I didn't know you could do that. And they were proactive in that. And I think you're right. I think it comes down to communication and having, if you've got a culture around claims in the organization that this is what we're here to do, is to help people, then those conversations go in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We're back to the customer again. I think ultimately the question is, you can run an insurance business where you sort of marginalize the customer and say, well, you paid X and that's how it works, and this is the legal document, and if you make a claim, we're going to nitpick you at the back end, right? And we know some of those insurers and so on. It's the kind of Ryanair approach. I think it's fine as long as you make it clear that you're getting a cheap policy and you're not likely to get the after sales service, if you like, as that you could get from others. I think Aon has come out with a thing about saying, don't pay more, but definitely look at the claims service that you might get, and don't move just for a few points of premium when you might find your claim service is rubbish as a result. And that is a kind of carefully worded thing of saying, why don't you start to think about paying a bit more for better service? And now if we're going to there, I think that's right. I mean, I think the insurance industry could argue, well, we've got low margins and we lose a lot of money in certain areas, and we've got to watch that, and that's fair enough. But to your point, if you're not really explaining what the benefits of the product are, then don't be surprised when people focus in on the things that don't work all the time, because what the industry does. It's a kind of negative approach, really, and it's it's the stuff we've talked about again with fraud as well, which gets talked about too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for that, Ben. That's good. Bit of a claims focus this week, and we'll be picking it up, as you say, in a couple of weeks' time at the conference.
Woohoo!
Okay, right. What are you doing this weekend, Ben? Anything good?
What am I doing? I'm watching the Ryder Cup.
Oh yeah, of course. You're
I
big into
mainly
golf.
be watching the Ryder Cup. Yeah, I think that should be interesting. It's a bit autumnal now, isn't it? So I'm not going. I'll do a few bits and pieces, maybe do some climbing and things. It's a bit of exercise, but I will be mainly watching the Ryder Cup, I think.
Yeah, that's
What about you?
That's good. Yeah, my son is starting to get into golf. I'm not into golf, but I quite like the Ryder Cup because it's a team thing. I haven't quite got my head around it, but it's us against the USA, isn't it? And
yeah, and it gets quite leery as well, which some traditionalists hate. My father-in-law just won't watch it, for example. He finds it absolutely appalling that people could behave like that. And they're drunk, some of them.
Yeah, some of them. Oh, it's ridiculous. But
some of them are drunk, for God's sake.
What I can't stand is the USA chants. USA, USA. There's a brilliant thing on Instagram, I think, where they've got chants from America versus chants from football matches. And it's so funny because they're going stuff like, "We believe you, you can win." And then it's on the terraces of Spurs against Arsenal. It's like,
yeah,
the referees are whatnot.
Bleep. We need a bleeper, don't we? Yeah.
I've got a bleeper somewhere.
Yeah, bleeper for next week. No, you're right. I mean, I think it's yes, it's a very cultural. There's a real cultural divide, I think, and also there's the whole theory of the Ryder Cup. So the Americans don't really have a team spirit. They're all a bunch of individuals. Like when Tiger Woods played, for example, he never really fired on all cylinders when he was playing in a partner, because you play, often you play two players against two players, basically. So, but there's more camaraderie and team spirit in the Ryder Cup European team. Right. So it always is interesting because the final day is basically individual players, and the Americans usually do pretty well in that. So it always gets very scary. Yeah. But yeah, no, maybe there'll be some quite funny moments, I think. Yeah, on that. But I'm not sure we'll win in America, to be honest. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's in New York, isn't it? So
yeah, a very difficult course. Apparently, really, really, really tough. Difficult course. Not that it matters to these pros these days. They're so good, and they've got technology coming out of their ears with their golf clubs and things. So.
Right. Okay.
Well, it's the golf clubs of today can hit a ball a lot further than the golf clubs of the Mashy Niblick days. You don't even know what a Mashy Niblick is, do you?
I thought it was a person.
It's like a Scottish golf club. It was called a Mashy Niblick. It was made of I was going to say ivory, but I meant teak or something, so it would be like, I think some people still use them.
Wow.
You wear your plus fours and you have a Mashy Niblick. There'll be none of that. It'll be carbon fiber.
Yeah.
Titanium, etc.
I guess Luke Skywalker would be good at golf because after he's had his hand replaced with a mechanical hand, I can imagine that he could really.
No, yeah, maybe you need a bit of feel on the old putting and golf, but yeah, I think a mechanical hand's not going to do it. Really,
not going to help.
I don't think so, but I mean, you never know. I mean, it's there's a thing you can get, a golf club you can get, which you literally don't swing it. You just press a button and it fires a bullet at the ball, and the ball goes. You can set how far the ball goes. I have seriously considered putting one of those in my bag, and just distracting my friends when I'm playing with them to oh, look at that, and then press the button, and off the ball goes. Oh, I've hit it 200 yards straight.
Yeah,
But,
brilliant. Good.
Yeah,
well, I'll
that's
watch
it.
a bit of
Ryder
that
Cup.
then as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week. Ryder Cup, beat the Yanks.
Good-o. Right. Okay. On that note, let's leave it there. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you next week. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.